to Movement Activity Labs that enhance whole brain learning. My name is Kaylee Scanlon, Education Coordinator at Shape America. Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is part of the 2019 Shape America By You For You webinar series. Member ideas shared with other members during webinars facilitated by Shape America. Joanne, take it away.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Joanne Hunter, a lifetime Shape America member since 1997. I've held many board positions, including Vice President of Physical Education for the state of Maryland, and I'm currently serving on Shape America's annual convention program committee. I have a Master's of Science degree in Adapted Physical Education and am CAPE certified. I also earned my Master's in Education from Columbia University in Motor Learning, Brain-Based Development from Dr. Ann Gentile, and my doctorate from Dr. Bill Anderson, so I really know this topic. I am an accomplished author with 64 publications and have presented over 190 conference sessions within the past 22 years. And I'm available for hire for keynotes, conferences, webinars, professional development on all different topics, STEAM, STEM, authentic assessment, portfolio development, core standards, as well as integrating other subjects into physical activities. I'm also a technology specialist, Ed TPA, and an initial program report viewer. And you can email me if you have any questions, which is located on the first slide. So when we're looking at today's webinar, I'm really excited to present this information because in the same way exercise benefits the muscles, heart, lungs, and bones, it strengthens the cerebellum and corpus callosum, both key areas of the brain. We know exercise fuels the brain with oxygen, but it also feeds it neurotonins, which increases the number of connections between neurons. Exercise also increases new neuron growth. Studies link new neurons to increased cognition, better memory, and reduced likelihood of depression. Starting with learning objective 1, you're going to learn about the benefits of exercise as it relates to health and academics, as well as value action-based learning through learning about activity stations using brain research supporting movement with academic learning that you can do within your classes right away. You're also going to be able to recall the brain's anatomy because just as the story where a man can be given a fish and he'll eat for a day, but teach that man a fish and he'll never go hungry, it's important to understand the mechanism behind why and how the brain works. So you can then create your own lessons using your class's favorite active games, since the materials I'm presenting to you only has finite information. We are going to do all of this by sticking to the agenda. That includes everything that you see here. I'm not going to read it for time's sake. However, I do want to point out that when you see the green comment cloud, which is next to the check-in pulse question, this is a visual cue on some of the slides that are signaling that the information on the slide will be used in a review activity or as a Twitter discussion. And we're going to be using #Shape Webinar on Twitter to keep the conversation going. So keep an eye out for them. So as we move on, look here, there's a green cloud now. Remember, visual cues signaling information that you're going to need to know for a pulse question or a Twitter discussion. In this case, what I would like for you to think about or jot down now is listing the benefits of exercise in terms of, one, its positive effect on health, both things that it increases as good things as well as decreases in terms of good things, as well as academic performance. So for example, in terms of positive health benefit exercise, we know that exercise decreases resting heart rate. It also increases oxygen to the brain. So those are just some examples. Please feel free to pause the webinar to jot down answers and then click play again to resume the webinar. So feel free to stop the recording now. Thanks for stopping and rejoining the webinar. I just told you that one of the health benefits of exercising is that it brings more oxygen to the brain through the blood. The brain MRI on the right side in this picture was taken after a 20-minute walk. The one on the left is of sitting students. Both are waiting to take a test. You can see how much more blood is in the brains of the active students compared to their non-active counterparts. More oxygen in the blood helps students learn and retain information. So now let's see how well you did. Researchers find that exercise will regulate mood and behavior, reduces stress, improves social skills, decreases the chance of cardiovascular and heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, cancer, obesity, osteoporosis, and of course there's more. In the picture depicts a whole bunch of other exercise things that benefit exercise. And then, of course, there's others that are on your list. Now, these aren't exhaustive lists. However, they are enough benefits that you can draw from when we assess Objective 1 a little bit later on. In addition to health benefits, exercise has also been linked to academic benefits, including memory and retrieval of cognition, academic performance, attendance has improved while people are doing exercise. It helps refocus their attention, grows brain cells, prepares the brain for learning, decreases school incidents. In that case, we're talking about problems in school, whether there be fights or cutting class and things of that nature. It also makes learning fun, and we're going to be talking about using some of the multiple intelligences, all part of academic benefits of exercise. Now, a chart of other researchers and their research findings is included for anyone wanting more information either for yourself or for use when you're trying to write an action-based lab grant. Now, movements have also been researched with findings so radical, it has changed the way teachers teach students. So, for example, what if I told you that how infants use their eyes to track a face or to reach out to touch a nose, give specific information about a specific subject, academic subject area the child may actually struggle with or excel in. It's kind of really neat information that researchers are now getting into. And so we're going to get into that a little bit more in just a bit. But what I'd like for you to do now is actually think about the following scenarios. Scenario number one is we have a student who panics when it's her turn to perform a fitness test item. She gets so upset, she gets lightheaded and hyperventilates. So I want you to think about that scenario. In the second scenario, a student gets anxious before games, which leads to a lack of focus and mistakes. And in turn, the team makes fun of her. She, of course, gets angry, and as a result of being angry, she's anxious, she's not focused, and she has trouble listening and communicating with the team on the court. What I'd like for you to do now is think about and list answers to one or both scenarios, making sure to please list the number of the scenario you're answering. Use bullet points to think about what you would do in each of these cases to help the student. And again, we're going to look at this on Twitter, again at #ShapeWebinar. Here we can share perspectives and ideas of what you're going to do for each of these scenarios. So again, please, you can stop the webinar recording to write your answers down and start it up again when you have listed the ideas to calm and relax students in both these scenarios. So you can stop the recording now. Welcome back. Let's take a look at some of these possible answers. For scenario one, what a lot of teachers like to do to try to help a student become more calm when a person is so anxiety-driven, they're lightheaded and hyperventilate, sometimes we ask, have you eaten any food? Sometimes we say, go get a drink of water. Sometimes we need to talk the student down to reduce anxiety. Or sometimes we can give the test either before or after class when the class isn't in session, because there might be some anxiousness because of who's watching her being, doing the test. And so we're trying to make it easier for that particular person. In scenario two, where the student is lacking focus and making mistakes because the team is making fun of that person, again, we talk to that individual. Generally, we give that person a water break. Sometimes we go into sports psychology and imagery. We do some tension and relaxation exercises. Now, all of these are specific physical movements that are proven to reduce stress and anger, and they help in communication skills as well to help students perform well in academic subjects. That's what these scenarios and how an infant reaches for a nose have in common. Before we discuss the specific movements and link them to reducing stress and anger and aiding communication, let's conduct an experiment to prove this point. So what I would like for you to do now is to think about, on a scale from 1 to 10, how relaxed are you right now? Are you totally relaxed, which is a 1, or are you really tight and stressed out, which is a number 10? Okay, so think about that right now. How relaxed are you? Totally relaxed is a 1. A 10 is you're really stressed out. Think about that scale. Now, while sitting or standing, I want you to do these two particular movements. Whether you have a water at your table or just pretend to take a sip of water, do that now. Take a real sip of water or hold a pretend sip of water in your mouth for a moment before swallowing. Do that 3 times. Now what I want you to do is an exercise called a hookup. And the hookups have a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1, as you see in the picture there, you're going to cross your ankles. And again, this can be done while sitting down or standing up. Either your right or left ankle can be in front. You're going to put your hand on your chest and cross your wrists palm to palm and lace your fingers. That's the easiest way to show what's on in that picture. So you should look like the man in the picture wearing the red shirt. What I want you to do is hold this for 1 minute with your eyes either open or closed. As you inhale, touch the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth at the hard palate. When exhaling, relax the tongue. And you can, again, perform this with your eyes open or closed. Do that 3 times. Just inhale, touching the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth at the hard palate. And when you exhale, relax the tongue. Do that 3 times. When you're done with that, for part 2, uncross the legs and the hands. Keep the fingertips together in front of the chest. Just as you see the girl in the picture in the pink shirt. And what you're going to do is deeply, breathe in deeply for 1 minute, holding the tip of the tongue on the roof of your mouth while inhaling, and then relaxing the tongue upon exhaling. And do that 3 times. Just inhale Again, the roof of your mouth, hold the tip of your tongue, and then exhale, releasing that tongue upon the exhale. Do that 3 times. Now, after you've done all of that, now how are you on the relaxed scale, on that scale from 1 to 10? Generally, a person feels more relaxed after performing these activities, whether it's just drinking the water, pretend or for real, or the combination of the two, sipping water, the hookup, or just doing hookups part 1 and 2. And if you aren't really more relaxed, don't be alarmed. It's a webinar and I'm rushing. So this isn't really the best of circumstances. But really try these activities again when you are stressed and see how do they help you. For people it did work on, these activities just took a couple of seconds and they reduced your amount of stress and your anxiety. Think about how this can actually benefit students of all ages. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, this is kind of crazy. You know, how is it that these activities work and what does this have to do with infants reaching for noses and get to the part where all of these movements increase academic skill? Okay, don't be so pushy and demanding. So what we're looking at specifically for each of these is when you're sipping water, it brings an emotional calm, which increases cognitive function. It also helps the storage and retrieval of information. In fact, swallowing and drinking water before stressful situations, including tests, improve academic performance. And I think all teachers tell students, go get a drink of water to help calm them down. Science has finally explained why and how this works. And I'll explain this a little bit later when we talk about the brain's anatomy. But sipping and swallowing water is something that students in both scenarios, when we talked about anxiety and anger, students should do. Any student in a similar situation that's going to calm them down and help with their anger. Performing the hookups, part 1 and 2, restores calm and self-control. It also organizes scattered attention. It stabilizes emotions and supports higher order thinking through correct posture and helps in listening and speaking skills. So anytime you're having those students or your students who are really getting very emotional or they're ready to do some higher order thinking, run them through these hookups. The tongue movements actually also help activate focus and balance. Therefore, hookups are physical activities the student in scenario 2 should perform to help her regain focus, to calm her down, stabilize those emotions, and help her communicate better with her teammates. And now these brain gym activities are great for class since they can be completed in seconds, whereas sitting and talking one-on-one with a student or teaching and performing mental imagery all takes time. Sipping water and hookup movement activities are designed to get the brain ready for learning. These movement activities are part of a process called PACE, which is an acronym for positive, active, clear, and energetic. The process for getting students ready to learn actually starts with energetic. But since ECAP isn't a catchy acronym, researchers agreed to stick with PACE and tell everybody to perform the steps backwards. No joke, that's exactly what they discussed, which is brilliant. Anyway, researchers have found that 70% of students performing PACE activities at least once a week decrease their anxiety scores. That's 70%. That's a lot. And as I just mentioned, energetic activities are performed first, including sipping water to help students retrieve information and calm them. Sipping water has this calming and retrieval of information property because we are 70% water. We lose about 2 to 3.5 quarts of water per day just in normal function. When we're dehydrated, the thought process slows down and the mouth and the brain disconnect. When a person is dehydrated, confusion, physical distress, headache, and fainting occur. That's why it's so important to sip water throughout the day and why these energizer activities were created, because they raise the blood pressure and epinephrine levels among drowsy learners, and they reduce restlessness among the antsy learners. So researchers recommend that after every 17 minutes of non-activity, these clear activities should be performed, such as brain or balance buttons, which help improve reading scores, and math. And I forgot to mention that there is a handout that accompanies this presentation. So all of this information is on there, and it includes the webinar slides, the station activities we're going to be talking about, and so all of the games. So all of that's going to be there for you. And on page 1 of the handout, all the movement categories activities are listed, and they include a picture of what the poses look like for easy reference. So moving on, when you're looking at the brain buttons, they are lengthening and stretching activities designed to stimulate the carotid artery, which supplies oxygenated blood to the brain. The more oxygen in the brain means an increase in learning and retention of information. So brain button activities also help reestablish directional messages from parts of the body to the brain and the visual system, which improves reading, writing, speaking, and following directions. So again, you want to improve reading, writing, speaking, following directions, do these brain button activities, which are those lengthening and stretching activities. Anytime you stretch, and we love stretching. Why do we love stretching? It feels good. And why does it feel good? It all does this. This is all interconnected. It is so awesome. Researchers found that movement crossing the midline of the body help students spell, write, listen, read, and comprehend, because it activates both brain hemispheres and coordinates visual, auditory, and kinesthetic abilities. Lastly, there are positive activities, including the hookup activities. These help correct attitudes. They improve listening and speaking skills and reduce anger. The brain does this by connecting the energy circuits to unblock stuck energy in part 1. In part 2, the brain hemispheres connect and strengthen the electromagnetic energy, which is light and heat. Therefore, when we watch how an infant uses his or her eyes to track a face, does the gaze stay on one side of the body, or does it track both sides of the face? If the gaze stays to one side, that child may have problems with reading, spelling, and writing. Any or all midline movement category components later in life. Same holds true for anybody's ability to reach for an object just outside of range. That can be an infant trying to touch a nose or an adult reaching for a newspaper. Observe whether that reach that's performed is crossed laterally or is it just to one side. Observe whether the arm lengthens or is it kept bent when an out-of-reach item is out of range. If the arm stays bent and not fully extended, the individual may have problems with math, reading, spelling, or any components for the lengthening movement category. I mean, this is really neat. So if the child excels in a particular movement, chances are then he or she will excel in that academic subject area. This line of research has become so popular in schools, educators place brain gym posters all over the wall reminding students how to perform the movement activities. And once students understand the movement, they self-regulate by selecting and performing the activity they need. This is especially important because after 17 minutes of non-activity, blood pools in the leg, and the brain sends a message to the body that it's at rest or sleeping. And then this develops spider or varicose veins and increases blood clots forming in the legs, which of course could lead to strokes and or leg amputation. And as mentioned earlier, any of these activities can be modified to make them easier or more challenging while performing them while sitting or standing or keeping your eyes opened or closed. So now this brings us to our next slide, which is looking at our assessment of our first pulse question. So let's see how you're doing so far. So far, we learned exercise can improve health and academic performance. An exercise benefit will flash on the screen. Think about or write down on a scrap of paper the number 1 if you believe the health benefit, if it is a health benefit, or write down the number 2 if it's an academic benefit. So for example, if I say regulate, the exercise benefit is regulating a mood, is this a health or an academic benefit? If it's a health benefit, think or write the number 1. If you believe that regulate mood is an academic benefit, then you write the number 2. And of course, in this particular case, this is a health benefit. So here's the next one. So what is helping refocus students? Is this a health benefit or an academic benefit? It is a academic benefit. Good job. Next one is grows brain cells. Is this a health or an academic benefit? It is. And of course, it did go bloop, 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 and it's an academic benefit. The next one is decreases diseases. Is this a health or an academic benefit? This would be a health benefit. And last but not least, this one's a little more tricky, softball batting. This one's a tricky one. Is this a health or is this an academic benefit? This one is actually an academic benefit because it crosses the midline of the body. Any activity that has body parts crossing the midline of the body will increase spelling, writing, listening, reading comprehension, and memory. And since I had a specific skill, as I said, softball batting, it then becomes academic. If I had listed softball in general, that could be a lifetime sport, then making it a health benefit. So I hope you did well, as this was the first learning objective. Now remember, we can continue to chat on this topic on Twitter at #Shape America website, which I'll again bring up for you a little bit later on. So now you know exercise extends benefits from health into academics, and that certain movements are linked to specific academic performance. Let's learn the mechanism that makes this all possible. And so that brings us to just watching then how an infant reaches and touches the nose. Much can be learned about watching how a child jumps, skips, crawls, and or walks, as they can be used to predict how well he or she will perform academically. It's crazy, but it's pretty awesome. This association was popularized by Gristmer in 2010 when he found that specific gross and fine motor skills predicted reading and math achievement. He found that skipping increased math performance, and therefore children having difficulty skipping may have problems with math. That is because skipping is a sequence process. If you remember, skipping consists of a step, hop, step, hop. In math, sequences are performed all the time. Now, you'll see in a moment that the premotor and motor cortex in the brain are right next to the area in the brain that performs math computations. And researchers found that doing well in one resulted in doing well in the other, and vice versa. When researchers realized that children with superior motor skills outperform their peers academically, they started looking at their brain. And since that time, researchers found additional connections between the body and mind and have explained how this phenomena came to be. They looked at the brain. In front of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in processing motor information and cognitive tasks. That's when researchers realized that exercising increases learning. Therefore, they started looking at the entire brain and what the brain areas do, especially when exercising. Since I know it's been a while since your last brain anatomy lesson, let's have a quick refresher. The brain is split into 4 quadrants: the left, the right, the front, the back, and there are 5 lobes. The left front of the brain, or A, on the slide, is responsible for facts. This is the rational part of the brain, accountable for logic, analytical, fact-based, quantitative data and information. The left back of the brain, or B, is about form. It also keeps the body safe. It's accountable for sequencing, organizing, detailing, and planning information. So now you get the idea. This is a handy chart to refer to in the future. So is the next chart, which is this one here, which explains the responsibilities of each of the 5 lobes. The first is the frontal lobe, which is located right above the brow line at the front of the skull and is where the brain retains information about everything. This is also where we find the premotor cortex, and this is in between the prefrontal and motor cortex, which plans and stores movement patterns. It controls behavior. The motor cortex, which is the back of the frontal lobe, and so when a person performs any cross-lateral movements, crossing the midline of the body, the 4 quadrants communicate with each other and organize the brain better, and this increases learning and memory. The parietal lobe is located at the top of the brain, and this is where the brain processes sensory information, solves problems, comprehends language. This is also why we're looking at multiple intelligences, because the more ways you can give information to students, the more they can process the information and they do better. The occipital lobe is the back of the brain where we process and store visual cues and memories. Temporal lobe, which is located at the side of the brain, processes language and hearing in that part of the brain. The cerebellum is located in the back and the base of the brain, where the brain stem is where we get our drive for survival and is where all of the automatic processes come from, like breathing and digestion. And the cerebellum is the birthplace of all learning and directly influences the prefrontal cortex function. Cerebellum is a very important part of the mind-body connection and helps children with ADHD as well as other behavior disorders, as well as dyslexia. And they help those students become successful through exercising those areas and performing other movement activities. For example, when the cerebellum is where motor patterns and balance abilities are stored. It is in charge of timing movements, attention, mental imagery, and language. It doesn't create movement. It makes movement smoother. Someone who can't judge distance, perform rapid movements, or walk with a natural gait, they have a delay in growth or a weak cerebellum. However, the cerebellum can be exercised. And when you exercise the cerebellum, that increases the functioning and reduces negative symptoms. Therefore, when the cerebellum develops while participating in physical activity, since the cerebellum is the birthplace of all learning and linked specifically to the prefrontal cortex, performing motor skills, balance activities, mental imagery, and timing tasks all will then improve language and math skills, as well as emotions, social skills, behavior, judgment, attention, and concentration will decrease. ADHD and help students with dyslexia read. Exercise and movement skills are the miracle cure for increased learning, memory, and retention. This phenomenon has been researched by many researchers, including Booty in 2008, who found that active lessons requiring motor skills, such as balancing, reaction time, were associated with better concentration on academic tasks. Physical activities crossing the midline enlist more parts of the brain that also develop better attention. And I've also included there some pictures just to give you ideas that you can do within class to help students crossing the midline of the body at different age levels, just to show that you can do this. What's, crossing the midline of the body. You have, so these are visual ideas and information, and I know I hate reinventing the wheel. So seeing a picture sparks creativity. So either use the pictures as is, or for example, like the girl using the beanbag as markers. You can, do other things to perform cross-lateral movements, like pick up the beanbag with your toes and place it in your hand and use it for an obstacle course or things like that. So hopefully these will spark some ideas even for yourself as you're looking at the pictures. So moving on, the corpus callosum is a bundle of fibers connecting the left and the right side of the brain. So when meeting a person or you learn vocabulary, the sound of the name is remembered in the left temporal lobe, and the visual image of an object is remembered in the right temporal lobe. So when hearing the name of that object, the brain matches the name with the image stored in memory. That's why it helps to put a face with a name. It's how we learn. All humans do this. For example, the word dog. You hear that word, dog. The sound of the name is remembered in the left temporal lobe, where language development is. In the meantime, when the word is heard, your right brain is searching for an image in your memory of that word. This is why teachers have a picture accompanying the vocabulary word. The visual image of the word increases learning and memory. So upon hearing the word dog in the left hemisphere, you've conjured up a picture of a dog in your right hemisphere. Unless you have me as a professor and I give you these as dog pictures. Yes, these probably were not the image you conjured up in your right brain when you heard the word dog. However, the more a child crosses the midline of the body, the better the connection between the right and the left hemispheres become, and that increases memory and learning. This is why it's important to say a word and show a picture, or explain the directions to a game and then visually demonstrate it so both the right and the left halves of the brains are working together. The moral of the story is verbalize and give visual cues to increase learning, as it makes a stronger connection between the corpus callosum. Participating in activities crossing the midline of the body increases the connection between the corpus callosum, as well as concentration, academic performance, attention, and behavior. Knowing what the different hemispheres do is important so you know what activities to perform. For example, the right brain is the animal brain. It analyzes the environment for all sights and sounds necessary for survival. Animals are 100% right-brained. Vision is located at the back of the brain. Most animals can see shape, color, motion, and depth perception, but humans added left brain symbolic meaning to visual images, such as the word dog in the left brain to match the image in the right brain. Practicing these concepts in movement games increases learning, memory, and retention. Then you have the premotor cortex. This is where muscle action is learned through practice, such as learning to dance, swing a tennis racket, play the piano, or hockey. When a behavior is learned, it becomes a habit. Some muscle actions can be practiced through mental imagery, which helps increase learning. If the premotor cortex is strong, people can learn complex actions quickly. If it is weak, a task will be learned slowly and the person will need a lot of practice. Now, the cerebellum is located at the back and bottom of the brain. This behaves the same in all human brains in that when neurons don't get enough stimulation, they become unstable and lead to behavioral problems, such as those associated with ADHD. However, exercising the cerebellum can increase functioning. That means deliberate and purposeful physical movement, such as balancing on a balance board, will help stimulate the neurons to maximize functioning. So, for example, a child with ADHD told to maintain balance on a balance board while simultaneously reciting the alphabet has reduced ADHD in research. In just a moment, you'll learn more about the mind-body connection to help make children smarter, better movers, and retain information longer. But first, let's check your knowledge regarding Objective 3. I know it's a little backwards, but there's a reason for it. So, looking at Objective 3. So, what I would like for you to do here is match the parts of the brain with its function before moving on to how movements improve specific academic skills. Perform this on your own piece of paper in front of you. You can stop the webinar to complete it and then restart it again when you have it completed. So stop the webinar now and see if you can match the parts of the brain with the definitions of the brain. So do that now. So welcome back. Let's see how you did. So here are the answers. I'm not going to read them for you. You can check to see how you did in terms of timing. I hope you did well as we move on to the last presentation section of the webinar, and that is looking at the action-based learning. And there's a saying, the person who can make hard things easy is an educator. Action-based learning, also known as ABL, improves student attention, mental sharpness, and focus. Students look forward to learning once they see movement is involved. Action-based learning is using movement to strengthen those academic concepts. It is backed by brain-based research supporting the link of intentional movements to learning, and students perform movement activities in a lab that prepares the brain for optimal learning. And what does that all mean? Well, action-based learning is performed in stations. There are generally limited equipment that is needed. There is a decreased waiting time, and all of the activities are developmentally appropriate in that the children at all ages are doing individual practice. What you see here are some of the pieces of equipment that include balancing, jumping, juggling, gymnastics, flexibility, muscle strength and endurance, rhythm, and tracking target games. It also includes some of the pictures that you see here, specialized equipment that you can buy or create for minimal cost. Labs can be conducted inside or outside in a gym or a classroom. where students move from station to station with a partner or a small group where their self-awareness, self-esteem, and social skills are enhanced. One major piece of equipment that is needed is the ABC pathway mat, as seen in pictures 1 through 3. The mat helps encode alphabet symbols, practice letter sounds, recognize numbers, and teach clockwise and counterclockwise. What I did was I created my own pathways mat. I used a white twin as well as a full-size sheet, and then used red and blue spray paint to create my own mat. So that's what you see there. You also need a 2-dimensional and a 3-dimensional learning ladder. A 2D ladder is pictured in number 4 and can be created with painter's tape or chalk. And I say painter's tape only because that makes it easier to get off the ground when you're done with it, rather than masking tape, which sometimes can be really sticky and hard to get up. The 3D ladders, as pictured in number 5, are wooden ladders, and you can find these at yard sales, thrift stores, or make your own. I made my own. I went to Home Depot and I got scraps of wood, and it cost me a total of $7. And I just painted it so that they could walk on it, because you're doing balancing on the ladders, and we'll talk about those activities in just a moment. You're also going to need activity cards, although those are not pictured here because they vary so much. Station cards are made of construction paper or tag paper that have the station directions and pictures on it. And of course, to laminate them for continuous use is very helpful. And then you can use different types of physical education equipment, depending on either what you have available, or you can get them donated or make them. You can go to a carpet store, for example, and ask for old rug remnants to make carpet squares, because they just throw them away. There's a lot of different books on the web regarding how to make your own equipment, or you can hire me. That's a great session that I love to present on making your own homemade equipment. Anyway, the handout for this session includes some of the developmentally appropriate modification and ideas and resources for the different stations. And so the first station, we're going to take a look at station 1. It builds the framework for learning. This station activity focuses on whole body brain coordination, which helps organize the brain. The activities performed for this station helps. Here you have all the links to learning and what you're doing. So anytime children are performing activities that cross the midline of the body, requires them to jump or perform non-locomotor skills patterns, including twisting, bending, stretching. That's going to help them place words on a page. Students will become better at these academic skills by participating in specific activities, including those here that you see: jump roping, juggling, and other activities that are crossing the midline of the body, such as non-locomotor skills, twisting, stretching, increasing attention, and improving reading. Now, I've included some games and activities to play. Again, those are in the handout, and there's a ton of additional information and games on this topic too if you're looking for, again, professional development, conference session topics. Email me. I'd love to continue this conversation with you or your group. Station 2, includes Integrating the senses, where locomotor skills for spatial awareness, you're looking at sequencing skills, patterning, directionality, dynamic movement, balance transfer, problem solving, you're coordinating auditory, visual, kinetic senses, eye tracking, and increasing core strength for neural pathways. When you are, feel free if you need to pause the webinar to take a look at the pictures more in depth, because again, they give you some ideas of what else you can do to exemplify points. So, take a look at that. So when children perform these motor skills, the following links to learning are being made. That means that this helps the brain follow the flow of words. They're sequencing patterns in math and reading. They're solving problems, and they're sorting information. This is why Station 2 activities include games such as your skipping, plyometrics, balance, and gymnastics activities. Skipping works on all three of these skills: balance, directionality, and sequencing. Sequencing because skipping breaks down into the step and the hop. The handout includes plyometric exercises, which are found on page 5, and gymnastic tumbling skills on page 6. So remember that any activities where the students are sequencing skills, they are going to improve math scores and reading. That goes for any balance and directionality activities as well. It's so awesome when you think about this. So again, remember and use all of this information to remind you of what the students are doing. Again, anything that they are sequencing, they are improving their math scores and their reading. Station 3, and I know I'm going through these fast, but again, you can look through this and email me if you have any questions later on. Station 3 is things that are vestibular development. So you're looking at core and muscle strength. You're looking at flexibility, body control, muscle endurance, facial awareness, dynamic balance, locomotor development, looking at high, medium, low levels, beat competency. So you're looking at rhythm as well as spatial concepts. Whenever you're doing any of these activities, you are linking to learning, specifically putting numbers and letters in sequence. You're helping them learn how to discriminate different sounds. You're helping the students place letters and words on a page, and it helps them write letters in proper proportion. And so putting all of these together, you're then looking at specific activities that I'm giving you on page 7 are different flexibility exercises, looking at specific rhythm activities using ribbons. And again, you're looking at that rhythm helps with that letter recognition and proportion and placing the words and the sounds on paper. Muscle strength and endurance, all of these things work on those academic concepts that are in those parentheses. So again, you have flexibility, rhythm activities, muscle strength and endurance, body control, balance. All of those help with sequencing, sounds, placement of letters and words, and writing letters in proportion. So before moving on to Station 4, here's a quick fact that 35% of the brain's ability to get what we visualize to the paper depends on good eye-hand and eye-foot coordination. This is why Station 4 focuses on visual motor control. So when we're looking at that, we're looking at eye-hand, eye-foot coordination. When you're looking specifically at eye-hand, eye-foot coordination, you're encoding symbols and words. You can use the ABC pathway mat. They're looking at improving peripheral vision development, and you're looking at beat competency, which all then help with all of that, and sequencing, sounds, placement of letter and words, and putting letters in proportion. There's a lot of research on the role of music in literacy, and there's a lot of information on that. That's also another thing that I love to talk about in a workshop, but then I digress. When children perform eye-hand and eye-foot coordination activities, the following links to learning are being made. Here they are recognizing and encoding strokes of letters and numbers. They're writing letters and numbers, reading for longer periods of time, and discriminating sound, and organizing information. And so all of these will help children at any time performing eye-hand, eye-foot coordination movements develop peripheral vision, beat competency, and improving all of these different academic tasks, which is really neat. Also, Station 4, visual motor control activities. I have many more activities on page 8. Additional visual motor activities are completed while performing on the action-based learning mat. Mat activities start on page 8 and continue through page 9. And again, I'm sorry I'm rushing through this, but I want to try to get to everything. Station 4, so then that brings us to Station 5, which is looking at the ocular pursuit for cerebellum support, tracking movement objects, increasing reaction time. You're moving from the novice to mastery stage, as well as target mastery. And when you're working on those visuals tracking, that's in terms of academic performance, you are increasing thought processing, organizing thoughts in sequence, discriminating same versus different, and you're also increasing higher level thinking. And so those are just, again, using the pictures of looking at tracking and understanding tracking moving objects and what that means, and gives you some ideas of what you can do with your students in order to increase that. Some of the things with visual tracking for Standard 5, linking to learning, improving eye fitness and tracking skills, will help reading for longer periods of time. This way their eyes don't get tired. So tracking is very important. So you want to include those tracking of objects, not only for physical education, but that will help improve their reading. Also, so when you're doing some visual tracking in physical education, some of the things I have in the handout include tracking games, specific on page 9, different target games, as well as racket sports. Really are heavy on tracking and target, doing things like crab soccer, doing things like bowling. I have different lead-up skills and reaction time games that you can have the students participate in. And then you can also look at some of those things on the web for additional ideas. Last but not least, station number 6, looking at higher level thinking with the action-based learning ladder. And here you're either doing the 2-dimensional ladder, which is easier since it's on the floor, versus a 3-dimensional ladder, which then you're working on balancing. And so here, again, you're looking at static or dynamic balance on different surfaces and equipment. You're looking at 2 to 3 dimension geometric shapes that you can put in the rungs of the ladder that they are doing the activities with. And when you are walking on the ladder or going in between the ladder steps. You're anchoring information, improving memory retrieval, and you're prepping the brain take tests. So here are some examples of doing that, performing skills on a two-dimensional ladder first. The games listed in the handout progress from easy to more difficult. Only after a student shows competency on the two-dimensional ladder should he or she be allowed to graduate to the three-dimensional ladder. And those are the principles regarding learning and the brain, as well as physical activities students can participate in to help increase academic learning through movement. So we have the word ladder. You can do things with math. You can do things with literacy, shape, colors, as you see in between the ladder up on the top picture. You know, I have word recognition. You can do shapes, colors, you know, math problems. So you can integrate a whole bunch of different things also with that and the higher level thinking as they are jumping, as they are balancing, all of those things. They can bounce a ball while they're balancing. Again, all of these great ideas that you can add. So finally, just thinking about and reflecting on, taking a moment to create a list and think and reflect on what your next steps perhaps are going to be. Thinking about what your current approaches are and what are you going to do differently based on this new information, and what are any new ideas that come to you that you're going to try in the future, whether that be with your class or just doing for yourself. And take the time to jot down these ideas. You can pause the webinar and complete this section and click play again to start it. Put this information up on Twitter because this is some great information for yourselves to use. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and it's something that will help ensure more students are successful academically, physically, and emotionally. And it's kind of neat to be able to do that. So some food for thought as we wrap up this webinar. Brain research supporting the connection between movement and learning, and that exercise enhances cognitive processing. You'll learn how movement teaches children how to release excess energy as well as improve coordination, attention, and focus. Movement aids in self-regulation, emotional stabilization, and self-expression. Movement increases language, academic performance, math, and reading scores, and decreases obesity. This webinar provided information regarding how specific movements are linked to and improve memory retention, reinforce academic concepts, and help balance brain chemicals through whole brain and whole body learning labs. Each action-based learning lab activity focused on the three components necessary for optimal brain function, which are challenge, feedback, and physical activity. And I would love to invite you all to continue this discussion via Twitter by answering some of these questions, including, writing up and creating your own stations. And if you choose to do that, again, following up on and creating a conversation so that we can all share information on this, which is powerful, knowing that what you know now about the specific physical activities being linked to specific academic performances, being able to do something of this nature using the handout, because this will be in the handout for you. It might look like this, having your create a station. Think about what game or activity title that might be. come up with the game details. What is the grade level equipment? If there's a standard, what does the diagram look like of the activity you're creating? Directions of how to play. Is there modifications making the game easier or harder? And if you can, some form of assessment. And so if you can, this would be great. I'm going to be posting something up momentarily for you so that you have an idea of what this should look at like. But I think the more we can become active and posting our and Twitter, the better we can help each other out with learning about action-based learning and putting in here are some different station ideas in addition to all of the information that I've given you in the handout. So finally, final pulse question, looking at learning objective number 2, just making sure that we've covered all our bases, discussing physical activity at length, taking the time to list the things that you can or already do that challenge students, and list the type of feedback that you do give your students. Because when you're looking at the different feedback, there isn't just one answer. There isn't an exhaustive list, but the idea is for you to think of the feedback and providing modifications in how that feedback helps students. It gives them challenges, and with the feedback, you have positive, specific, individual, corrective performance, and feedback should be timely. All things that you should be doing with your students to help them as they are moving on and they are learning and making that leap from physical activity to academic performance. And also for yourselves, as we finish up, I have some references here as to the things that I have talked about within the webinar, and I want to thank everybody for your time. And if you have any questions, again, please email me and at dr.joanne_hunter@yahoo.com. I would be more than happy to answer any questions, and please continue this discussion on Twitter.
Joanne, your webinar was fantastic, very informative and useful.
Oh, thank you very much.
Of course. To our audience, thank you for viewing today's webinar. A certificate of one